Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning in the US. Maneco64 here, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So Billy is here today with us. I'll be taking your questions, trying to answer them. I want to talk about government. I want to talk about money as usual, the system. I want to talk about socialism. I want to talk. Hi, Josh. I want to talk about some concepts that seem good that I've spoken about how to guide credit and have decentralization of banking. But I've spoken about Dr. Richard Werner, who explained really well how the banking system works. But at the end of the day, I think deep down, if we look at these systems and if we try to allow government to be involved in money, socialism, all of these systems, in theory, they work really well. But I think in the end of the day, if you go back to time immemorial, the problem is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Human nature doesn't change, and socialism ends up being a really bad system. It really screws the people instead of helping the people. So that's why I'm still sticking to my concept of small government, freedom, liberty, and also the concept that government shouldn't be involved in money. They can try to borrow money, but it would be real money, and we wouldn't give them, allow them to create central banks and legal tender laws. So I see some of you are coming on. I guess in the States it's still fairly early, but being that it's Sunday, some of you might be up or not, depends. So we've seen, we got Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen. Hi, Laura. Hi, Weber Coin. Hokey Dokey. Hi, Hokey Dokey. Anthony Rivera's here. Good afternoon, Mara. Did you hear about Trump wanting to have the dollar backed by gold? No, I haven't heard that. I actually don't think the dollar, that's an oxymoron, I would say. Because the term dollar is a weight of silver and gold, so you can't really have it back. I think what you mean is the Federal Reserve note being backed by gold. Maybe that would be a step in the right direction, but government would still be involved. I think we need that HR 5404, I think it is. I think Congressman Mooney from West Virginia, he put that bill through. That's what we want. We don't want the dollar backed by gold. We want gold as money and silver as money. So we need to take that out of there, the backed by. We don't need backing, because if you already have gold and silver as money, that's it. No need to back anything. Hi, David. Michelle, nice to see you too. Good morning, Coin Junkie, AG. Hi, Pablo. Nice to see you. The Libra fraudster. Is the rise of Bitcoin alarming? One world currency, etc. Well, I'm sure there's two possibilities. I think the decentralization of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is a good thing, but I'm sure the bankers and the politicians, the powers that be, are going to try to get involved. So, but 1 second, let me take a coffee. Sip of coffee. So over here, it's 5 to 2 in the afternoon. The weather's still fairly nice. It's sunny. It's not as warm, but I played golf this morning with some friends. We teed off at around 8 a.m. and I was finished before 12, so that was nice. And now I'm home here. Billy's here today. He's taking a snooze as usual. So yeah, so that's my answer about Bitcoin. They'll try, I guess, Ripple. A lot of people say it's the banksters' currency. Hey, Jake, nice to see you in Hong Kong. Yeah, of course. I'm still, I guess, I don't know what time it's in Hong Kong. Maybe 9 o'clock in the evening or something like that. Uh, David, which is better, Gold Money or Glint? It's not a credit card, actually, David. It's a debit card, so you can't really borrow on it. I have both, and I have to say, Glint is a lot more user friendly, and they've got an app as well. And you can, the Gold Money doesn't, and Glint allows you to spend your gold directly. While Gold Money, you have to first, redeem your gold, transfer it to your local currency, and then load your card. But with Glint, your card is already loaded, and you can change the currency you want to use. You can change it to gold, to pounds, even to euros or dollars. And of course, Glint Pay is coming out in the US beginning of November. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about I've been thinking about this the last couple of days is that when people talk about reserve currencies, we should ignore that. We should have our own reserve currencies, individually. If we really believe in self-reliance and individual freedom, we shouldn't really care. Gold, for me, gold will always be a reserve currency. Silver, and there might be other competing currencies like cryptocurrencies. Even unfortunately, the fiat money currencies are to some extent part of my reserves, but I try to keep a small proportion of it. So I think that's the other thing to think about, because people are always concerned, oh, when are we going to have a reset? When is it, the dollar going to be backed by gold, or when? It doesn't really matter. As long as they allow us to have whatever currency we want, we should act like central banks, just like Jim Sinclair has said in the past. So that's the other thing I wanted to say. Rolf, Bob, what's going on? The IMF says Europe needs 150 million refugees now. Well, IMF, I thought the UNHCR was involved in charge of that, which is the UN Human Rights Commission. They should take care of refugees, not the IMF in the first place. I think what they're mean, though, is that Europe is getting older. So the population is growing older, and there's less people of working age, and they want to. But instead of encouraging the indigenous Europeans to have more children, right, to tax them less, to maybe give incentives for them to have children, instead of doing that, they just want to bring a horde of people from other cultures. And I'm not being racist, and I didn't, using the word horde might sound a bit offensive, but there's a lot of things they can do to help fertility rates within Europe. They don't have to bring in 150 million refugees. And don't forget, the IMF, they're part of the banksters, so we can't really trust them. Have you taken the time to look at Elastos? I haven't. What is Elastos? Is it a cryptocurrency? I haven't had a look to. These, I don't think the power brokers of the world will allow gold as money. There's too much of it in the hands of the peasants. Well, gold is money, so they can't change that. Gold is money, so it might not be currency at the moment, but actually with Glint, it is currency, but it is money for me. David, thank you for the super chat donation. I appreciate that. And I not only I appreciate super chat, but I also appreciate everyone that's here. You don't have to contribute. It's just nice to have you guys participate anyway, but it helps, of course. What's a gold app? Well, Glint Pay has an app. Their card, you get a debit card from them, and you get also an application for your phone. They're going to also do a desktop version. So that's how it works. They store the gold in Switzerland for the EU customers, UK customers, and you can spend the gold, and it's allocated to your account. It's not held by them, it's held by you. And for the US, they're going to do the same thing, but the gold's going to be held at a depository in the United States, and you'll be able to take delivery as well. Tesla 3, why you don't criticize the liberals? You must be one of them. Is that what you mean? Actually, I'm apolitical. I'm for. I hate government. I think government should be really small or even non-existent. Liberals. It depends. I mean, liberals in the U.S. means left wingers. In the UK, in the 19th century, liberals meant people that wanted small government and free markets. I'm not either left or right, Tesla 3. So why don't I criticize them? Why waste the time? Why waste time criticizing liberals or conservatives? Why not focus on freedom, sound money, being self-sufficient? Let's not waste time, criticizing these people. That's what they want. They want you to spend your energy wasting it. So that's why I try not to get involved. The only reason sometimes I talk about Trump is because he's in charge. And I still believe I'm not too convinced that, he's for real. I think he's still part of the deep state. It might be a bit more a nicer part of the deep state, but I'm very disappointed about his foreign policy. He said he was going to allow allow other countries to be sovereign, cooperate with them, but he seems very belligerent with Russia now, with the Chinese, with Iran. So I don't know. I would rather have had. I think basically Trump was a controlled opposition to kill the Tea Party, to kill all the Ron Paul support, and to actually take over the Tea Party by the powers that be. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Robert D, do you have to worry about paying capital gains tax when you do a glint purchase? Yes, in the UK you do. I'm not sure what the capital gains tax situation in the US is, but in the UK you don't pay capital gains tax with sovereigns, but they don't store sovereigns. So if you buy a big amount and gold goes up a lot, you might be liable for capital gains if you sell it. But when I met them over a month ago, I had a 2-hour meeting with them. They are lobbying the UK tax office, or HMRC, about the status of gold as it pertains to capital gains tax. They're arguing with them that it is just like another currency and that there's no capital gains tax on foreign exchange in the UK. So they're actually lobbying the government, and they have people behind Glint that are actually members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords. So they're trying to make it. That's why I probably won't hold too much gold with them for now. But they're actually trying to work to solve that problem, so they don't have to hold. So they can, people can hold it without worrying about capital gains. I hope they'll be successful. I'm not too sure, though. JSDP, the new $100 bill has a jug gold. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. But as I said, ideally, we shouldn't have these bills. We should just have gold again and silver. Because a bill implies that the money is backed by gold. And I don't think money should be backed by gold. Money should be gold and silver. Just like JP Morgan said, gold is money, everything else is credit. We don't want credit anymore. JSDP, Paula, my rabbi friend told me the wealth transfer is coming and silver is the chance for the poor man. Your rabbi, interesting. Yeah, silver. I have silver too. I talk a lot about gold and cryptocurrencies, but I do have silver as well. Quite a bit of silver. I mean, I've got one of these. That's not, small part of what I have. This is 10 ounces with a kookaburra bird from Australia. So yeah, I've been lately. I've been looking into this Professor Werner, and he talks about guided credit, small community banks. Uh, how can I say, nonprofit community banks like they have in Germany, that they can issue credit. And it seems like a good idea, but deep down, I think what we need, yes, we need decentralization, but we need also governments to be outside of not involved with money. There's too much power in government. We shouldn't give it that much power. And I think that's why the founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson were right. Um, I don't know, Simon, if an ounce of gold buys a house in Venezuela. Uh, the thing is, Venezuela is a diverse country. You can buy a mansion in a nice area, or you can buy a shack in a shanty town. So I don't know. Um, but do you want to go and live in Venezuela at the moment? Probably not. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you. Uh, Moosehead, could you forecast the Brazilian domestic coin? Do you see strong military being positive for Brazil? I mean, the Brazilian economy, I think it's down in the dumps so much that maybe the only way is up. Military, I don't think they're as powerful. And from what I read, the military, they are powerful and strong, but I don't think they want to be involved in running the country anymore. Pad, Mario, I'm in the camp. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. Liberals call themselves progressives, which means communists. Their definition, not mine. Yeah, I agree. Liberals in the U.S., they are communists. I would even say that conservatives are communists in the U.S. It's not any different, in my opinion. They still want big government. Has it changed? Has the size of government changed under Donald Trump? No. He's increased the debt massively. So they're all communists. Even Donald Trump, you might think it's silly, but if he was a true free market individual freedom guy, he would have abolished the Fed already. He would have abolished the inland revenue. He would have yeah, he would have given power back to the states. He would have abolished, home Department of Homeland Security and all that. Susan Chappell, thank you for the super chat donation. So I hope that answers your question, Pat, and I hope that answers your question about Brazil, Moosehead. Pablo, how do you view Great Britain if Brexit is fulfilled next year in March, I believe? Well, actually, I don't think Brexit, as I've always said, Brexit is a scapegoat. Great Britain is heavily indebted. It has an aging population, and it's basically bankrupt. So things are not going to get better. They're going to keep financially repressing the public, punishing savers, screwing, the elderly. Yeah, I mean, I've just heard from a friend of mine that he had to put his mom in a care home. And what they do here in the UK, these care homes, they take you, and then you have to like sell your house, and they take the money from your house to pay for it until you die. So you see, they promise you free healthcare, NHS, and this lady, my friend's mom, she even worked all her life in the NHS. So they promise them all that, and then when they get ill, and she's got Alzheimer's or dementia, she's, I don't know, 90, and when you get ill and you need care, they say, what they've done here in the UK is that they've classified dementia as not a disease, so it's like a social thing. So the NHS doesn't cover it. So that's where the UK is going, and it doesn't matter if we're out of the EU or in the EU. You know, unfortunately, the City of London is in charge still. They're gonna, keep sucking the wealth out of the public to pay, for their speculation. So what can you do in that situation? Well, you got to try to look after yourself as much as possible and not depend on the government, and make sure you don't hold too much of their Bank of England notes. So that's where the UK is right now. So not a pretty place in terms of justice. Still a nice place to live, but not free at all. So I hope that answers your question. Uh, Robin, I haven't looked at the latest perspective on Glint, on the Glint Pay website. Jake, used flat prices in Hong Kong have been being flat as of late, but just have started falling on some properties. That's the other thing as well. I would love to see house prices in the UK collapse, because that would mean that because the government here, they give you a £325,000 threshold. If your house is worth above that and you die, your inheritors have to pay 40% above that level. So I would love to see house prices here collapse, so that the government would run out of money and would not get as much money from people dying and leaving their houses to their children. Because let's say your parents die, or your mom dies, or your dad, and their house is worth £1 million, which is quite common here in London, and then you pay no tax till 325, so you end up paying 40% tax on anything about 325. So like 675,000, you're going to be paying like over £250,000 in inheritance tax. That's why I want to see the housing market collapse here, and that's probably why the Bank of England, which is supposed to be independent, that's why they're keeping rates low for so long, to keep the scam going, so they can suck wealth out of the British public even more. But I would love to see that happen. But then again, they'd probably lower the threshold if the prices went down. JSD Pollard, 100 years ago, 2 ounces of silver got 30 acres of land in Virginia. Talk about being devalued. Wow, yeah. Hopefully one day that will happen again. I think it will, because things never last forever. Things go in cycles. Jeff Yu, good morning, from sunny Bradenton, Florida. Great. That's near Tampa, isn't it, Bradenton, if I'm not mistaken? Laura asked, Brexit good for the City of London? What's your opinion? It doesn't really matter for the City of London. They will do well no matter what. So, because the City of London is a sovereign entity, it's not linked to the UK, so they can do whatever they want. They can operate from there, but they can, their schemes can be based offshore, as that documentary Spider's Web said. I recommend that Spider's Web documentary about the City of London. Yes, Jeff, smash the like button. That would be good. James Reason, keep up the excellent work. Oh, thank you, James. I try to, sometimes difficult to try to make it interesting as well, to always have a new thing to talk about every day, but I try. Hopefully, that will keep going. Robin Jones, I'm going to equity release the max from my house and spend the money so government can't steal it if I need care when I get old. That's right. That's probably the best thing to do. Uh, Tony De Bruin, in your opinion, which jurisdiction is the most economically favored for retirement today? Uh, well, I guess I'd have to say outside of Europe, outside of the Western world, I guess it would be. I'm not sure where. Maybe Costa Rica. There's a lot of people who go there. Even Brazil. I've got a Brazilian passport. I could go there, but you know, I've come to the conclusion sometimes, uh, because looking back at my family, my dad's side, and even my mother's side, my great grandfather, he left Italy in the early 1890s as a young man, went to Brazil with his brother, all on their own, the two, and then he built up his family, did quite well. Then he decided to move back to Italy with his children in 1913. So they all went back to Italy. And then the war started, and my great grandfather didn't want uh, my grandfather and his brothers to fight in that war. So they went back to Brazil. Uh, I mean, it's a good question, Tony, but I think unfortunately my conclusion, and I grew up in Brazil, I've lived in Switzerland, I've been in the UK now for 26 years. I kind of wonder if it's worth trying to go from place to place, trying to find the best place to maximize things, because you go somewhere and they could always change the rules there. So at least if you're somewhere where you know what the game is, you might try to be able to play the game differently. I'm not saying you do anything illegally, but you think outside the box. So that's what I'm thinking now. I could very easily go with my wife, move back to Brazil, and live very well there. But we still have some family here, and what things could change in Brazil as well. So I don't know. I don't know. But I would say it would probably be, maybe the Southeast Asian countries, Latin America. Uh, I wouldn't consider the Middle East, even though, Lebanon was supposed to be a really nice place in the 50s and 60s, was considered the Switzerland of the Middle East. But that area of the world is too, how can I say, turbulent. So yeah, I would say, Latin America and Southeast Asia, if you are gonna think seriously about it. Jake says, here, here, I'd like to see him collapse here too. That's in Hong Kong, yeah. Thanks, what a shambles. Yeah, Susan, it is good to have more than one passport. Uh, I was lucky because my dad, back in the 80s, he thought about that, because having a Italian grandfather or even a great grandfather, you have the right through the Italian blood laws, they call it, to get a passport from there. And that's how I got mine, because my dad got his, and then the whole of my family, like my sisters and my mom, got it, even though my mom has no Italian background, but my dad got it, so I've got Brazilian and Italian, and it's been really helpful to me because I was able to move to England in 1992 with a EU passport. With the Brazilian, I wouldn't have been able to come here. It would have been a lot harder. Josh Coverley. I did like Switzerland, and I still like Switzerland. I mean, I was quite young. I was in my early mid 20s when I was living and working there. I got an offer to come and work in the city of London, and that's why I decided to come here. But if you've got, if you're well off and your children have grown up and you've got a bit of money saved up, Switzerland is a great place to live. It is very orderly. There's a joke in Switzerland that there's about 8 million policemen there, because the Swiss are very like if they see you on the street doing something you shouldn't, like you park in the wrong place, they come. Anyone will come and have a go at you. They're a bit like that orderly, uh, but it works. So yeah, but it's an expensive place. Simon Atta, will the current China stock market crash? Well, actually, the Chinese, I think the U.S. stock market has been crashing more than the Chinese of late. Yeah, I've looked at the chart of the Chinese stock market; it's been going down the whole year, and we are near the lows there. But the moves have been a lot sharper in the U.S. I think China will do a lot better than the U.S. They still have quite high growth, and their economy is based more on investment and not consumption. So if I had to, I'd put my money on China, actually. Tony De Bruyne, thank you for the 10 Canadian dollar super chat donation. I appreciate it. David Morsilli, traveling with gold or silver seems risky. Yeah, well, I've traveled already, with a few sovereign coins in my pocket, and I put it together with the other change, and you go when you go through the control, the security control at the airport, you just put it there with the other coins, and these people don't even know the difference. But of course, if you're going to take a lot more, a big amount, that's a problem. Um, but with Glint Pay, for example, you could use that anywhere in the world. It's on the Mastercard. You'd have to, you could take, if you had like $100,000 worth of gold with Glint, and you travel to China or anywhere else in the world, you could spend that gold, with your Mastercard. So that's the advantage. But for moving to another place and taking your gold, that's different. But there are companies that ship gold abroad, like Brinksmat, they do shipping. You have to pay them, of course, but you need to check where you're sending it to, if there are laws against rules against bringing that kind of stuff into that country. You need to do your homework, but it's doable. Simon Atta, Lebanon stinks, garbage everywhere. Well, there you go. I don't know. You're probably right. I was just saying it looked like a nice place, in the past. And you look at some of the photos. Beirut is looks like a nice place, but as I said, too turbulent still, I think there. JSD Pollard. My first time I drove through Switzerland, I opened my door and found a big bag of weed. It was a great weekend. Remember nothing. Water Shambles, is Glint effectively going along with your bank account? Uh, kind of, and they told me that that's the next step. They're trying to work to get the banking licenses to become like a bank. So when you get paid into your bank account, you could, in dollars or pounds or euros, you could put it into gold right away and have your direct debits and payment all being done by Glint Pay. But right now they're not a bank yet, but that's something they're working on. And I found that out by going there. They invited me to go to their offices in London, and I met with them for about 2 hours. Yeah, Robin already got his Glint card. Glint is going to be available beginning of November in the US. I don't know the exact dates. I think they're going to launch at the Fort Lauderdale boat show, which is an interesting place to launch. I think that boat show starts 30th of October to the 4th of November, and they're going to launch their card there at the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. There's going to be a lot of, I think they're trying to cater also for high-end clients in the US, but I think it's interesting for everyone, really. Glint. Uh, Pablo, I think it will definitely be available in Canada as well. I haven't heard about exactly when that will happen there, but it's going to be available in the US. I'm sure it will be available soon in Canada, but I can't tell you exactly when. Glint's already available, is available in the UK, and also the EU, Robin. It's also available for other EU countries. Yes, Susan, I know Fort Lauderdale. I've been there a few times. My dad was into boating, and he had a really good friend who actually built motorboats in Florida. So yeah, Fort Lauderdale is a big boat show. Yeah. Simon says, I read the Russia alternative to the SWIFT system is very, very successful. Do you think it's a nail in the US coffin? Um, I wouldn't even say it's a nail in the coffin because I think the dollar is still going to be around for a long time. It will just lose its relative importance. But yeah, it definitely doesn't help the dollar as a reserve currency. Billy just woke up. He was sneezing. Billy, say hello to everyone. There you go. So yeah, it's like the bless you, Billy. Yeah, it's like the pound. It hasn't been the reserve currency for almost 100 years. But you look at the pound. It's still held by some countries as reserves, but it's not as important, of course, as a currency. I think the best thing for is that if you get alternate payment, systems, alternate reserve currencies, it's always better because that means that these currencies will have to be sounder, these fiat money currencies, because they'll have to compete with us. But in the last 70 years, the dollar has been the top dog. It's had very little competition, so it's kind of been bad for holders of dollars because they've been able to, basically run it down to the ground. But it's like, if you play a golf tournament and there's only 10 players and most of them are really high handicappers and there's one player that's a good player, he's always going to win. But if you have 150 players and they're all really good golfers, there's going to be more competition, better golfing. It's the same thing with the currencies. Susan, how do you think the pound will do after the dollar collapses? Well, I think all fiat currencies will sync together with the dollar. The movements we get now in fiat currencies, where the dollar gets stronger against the euro, and then vice versa. These are just like fluctuations that happen short term, but they're all sinking. But sometimes some of them sink faster than others. And then the dollar will come up for a bit of breath, and then but they're all going to sink. So if you live in the UK, yeah, you will need to hold some pounds, unfortunately, because that's what you transact in. But I wouldn't hold too many dollars or anything else. I'd stick to the currency of the money of kings or the money of gentlemen, that is gold and silver, respectively. Hard assets. That's right, Rob. Uh, the only difference between gold and silver and other hard tangible assets is that gold and silver are very marketable What does that mean? That means that you can exchange them anytime for anything. But an antique or a vintage car, which also holds its value, when things get bad financially and monetarily, it's a lot harder to exchange that. But of course, if you can hold those things through the crisis, it's very good over time. And land as well, and wine, fine wine. Will the banks open after the collapse? Well, yeah, banks will always reopen. It's just being. You need to be careful not to have too much, assets in those banks, because when they do close, they will screw you. So that's why you should never try to have as little as possible in there. But they will close and reopen. Danny Djokovic, old empires such as Roman and Ottoman are about to rise once again. Well, I guess the Ottoman Empire is like you look at Turkey and what happened after World War One. They divided the Middle East up. Is the Sykes-Picot in 1924, and that was a big mistake. I agree. And Roman Empire, I'm not sure. I mean, some people argue the Roman Empire never really collapsed. You walk past the Bank of England in the city of London, and there's an SPQR sign on the Bank of England outside, which is the Senatus Popularis Romana. Uh, some people argue that the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church is still very powerful. Isam al-Din Ahmed, he thinks the DAX is, yeah, I think the Dow is way overvalued against European indices, but I think it's even more overvalued to the FTSE 100 in the UK. The FTSE 100 is basically at the same level it was in 2000, which is about 7,000. The DAX, I think, is a little bit more, has done a little better than the FTSE, but also hasn't done as well as the Dow. I agree. I would, if I was going to bet, I'd probably be long the DAX and short the Dow. Don Troll on Shambles. Mario, what do you make of Charles Nenner's call on gold at $900? He's a former Squid member, Yeah, I know. The thing is, he's been wrong this year, because a few months ago he was saying that he was buying bonds and that they're going to go up in price. And they've actually gone down in price and made new lows. And he always says that he doesn't predict prices, he predicts turning points. And so I'm not really concerned where gold goes in terms of fiat money. I personally don't think it's going to go to 900. I think we bottomed in August, on August 15th at 1160. So I don't see it going to 900. And if it goes to 900, that means the world is, that means things are not well with the world at all, and I'd still want to hold my gold. Money, one-eyed mind. Yeah, Susan Chapel. Yeah, the Freemasons are very powerful, and like the secret societies. I mean, JFK talked about it, but I guess we have to. The only thing I would say, you have to differentiate between the top guys in these secret societies and the general, members. I think they're in there for good causes and like charity, but I think there's something more sinister at the top. I would say even the British police. I think you need to be, if you want to be high up in the police in the UK, you need to be a Mason. That's what people have told me. Yeah, I saw that, Michelle, that Poland has bought a lot of gold. I also saw that Hungary has bought a lot of gold as well. So that's very interesting that the Eastern European countries are loading up on gold. Poland has 110 tons of gold. Is our gold safe in the UK? It's probably safe, but they're going to use it to manipulate the market. So I would tell the Polish government or the central bank there to take all their gold back to Poland, because the system is not a based system anymore. So why do you need to keep it with the Bank of England? Well, they want you to keep it there, Poland, because they want to be able to lease it out to the market so they can keep controlling the price. So I would tell Poland, tell your local politician to tell the central bank or the treasury in Poland to bring the gold home. Doesn't need to be in London. Australia has about 80 tons. Yeah, that's not that much, really. I think, but Australia, of course, is rich in resources. Watersham was that look on the bank manager's face when I took my cash out because I didn't want to be an unsecured creditor. Priceless. That's right. And they ask you as well. I've had this experience before. If I go take over 2,000 pounds out in cash, I did that years ago, and they said, "Oh, why are you taking that money?" I said, "None of your business. It's my money." But technically, I guess they were right. It wasn't my money. Uh, Dean Reynolds, how many ounces of gold and silver do you think the average person should own during the economic collapse? Well, Dean, I mean, you have to think of gold and silver as savings. So it depends on your financial situation, your circumstances. Uh, it's like asking how much money should I save, basically. The thing that gold and silver do for you in an economic collapse is that it actually, you know, uh, opposite to holding paper money, it will still be there after the economic collapse. That's all it does. So, if you have 10,000 pounds in the bank in the savings account, and you don't need that, so I would take that out and put, uh, 75% in gold and 25% in silver. That's what I would do. So you can, that would be the proportion. There's a lot of gold being bought. Do they actually take delivery of this physical metal? Well, what do you mean by they? I mean, people like us, small investors, the small people. Yeah, they usually do take delivery. I think the very wealthy people as well are taking delivery because they don't trust the banks. But maybe the banks, the bullion banks, aren't taking delivery. The hedge funds don't take delivery because a lot of the regulations for hedge funds don't allow them to have hard assets. So they have to buy the paper gold. But I would say the very wealthy, uh, the average, in small investors, they are taking delivery, and even countries are taking delivery. But they should take delivery from. They shouldn't leave their gold with other countries like the Bank of England, Poland, and Hungary. They should bring their gold home. Home. Are you welcome, Dean? No problem. Kevin asks, why so much percentage in gold and not silver? Well, that's just my personal preference. Silver is a lot bulkier and difficult to store. If you buy a huge, the with 1 ounce of gold, you can buy 80 ounces of silver. right now. So I think you don't need to buy as much silver to do really well if things do get bad, because I think silver will go up a lot more than gold. And gold is easier to store and safer because it's not as bulky, because you don't need as much, you know, because the price is a lot higher than silver. That's my preference, but you could do it 50-50 if you want. It's all up to you. Susan said, I feel we are close to a correction happening. Is that in gold and silver or in the stock market? The stock market to me still looks quite bearish. We're doing some consolidation now the last week, and I think we're going lower. Yeah, I agree with you, Susan. Yeah, stock markets are looking dodgy. The other thing I looked at, someone wrote, I think it was on Zero Hedge or somewhere else. They looked at the New York Stock Exchange Index, which is the index of all the securities traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And this year it made a top in January, and it has never made a top since. So it actually didn't confirm the new all-time high in the Nasdaq, in the S&P, and the Dow, and that was quite interesting. I think the ticker for that is NYA. You guys could look that up. So that's not a good confirmation. It's a non-confirmation. Hi, Brian. Top of the morning. Well, it is afternoon here, but top of the morning where you are, I guess. So where are the cryptocurrencies? That's the only market trading right now. So Bitcoin 65.25, Ethereum 206, LITECOIN 53. So yeah, it's funny, the cryptocurrencies of late, there was a spike last week, but lately they've been trading like silver has for the last few years, going nowhere, which is strange. Well, hi Matthew. I think gold technically looks pretty good. It broke out from a trend line that was coming from, down from the move we've seen down this year. I did notice though that up until Tuesday last week, the commercials, they've turned around and gone short gold quite a big amount, but that wasn't able to keep the price of gold down. So that's the only thing that's hanging over the market, but I think it looks pretty good technically. What a shambles. Yeah, the US dollar looks strong to other currencies. The only thing I noticed lately with the stock market under pressure, it has done well against the euro and the pound, but it's dropped quite a bit against the yen. So that's kind of counterbalanced that. And don't forget that the dollar index made an all-time low in March of 2008 at 70.69. And gold at that time made a new high at that time, March 2008, at 1,030. And now we're around 95 or 96 in the dollar index. So it's gone up like 25 points. And gold has actually gone up from 1,030 to 1,230. So sometimes, the dollar index and gold move together. It's not written in stone that if the dollar index goes up, that gold goes down. And what we've done in the last 10 years proves that. Brian Callahan saying he's buying generic silver, and now he's buying eagles. Okay. So I'll stay on for another 5 minutes. So we'll be an hour. So I'll take some more questions here in the last 5 minutes. Get food and water supply. Vance says, "Yeah, hi Vance. I saw actually an interesting video by uh, JON X Army, John X Army. One of you guys sent me the link, and I thought it was a joke, but he was quite serious. He's gone out and he started buying spam. Am I going to be? And he's saying I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm trying to get people prepared because you know he seems to think, talking from people who are in the know, that things could get bad if the system comes down for a few months, and that you need enough food to survive for 6 months. That's called prepping, of course. Uh, that's not something I focus on, and I actually don't want to. How can I say, talk about these things? Not because I don't think it's important, but because I think sometimes it's exaggerated. And why do I say that? Well, because I lived in Brazil when we had currency collapses. Yes, the shelves get quite bare and empty in the supermarkets, but life still goes on. But maybe in the United States it could be different because the Americans have been lived a pretty blessed life in terms of abundance for the at least you know since well, the Civil War, you'd say. Maybe the Great Depression was a bit more difficult, but Americans have had it really well. So if that were to happen in the US, it could be a problem. The UK, where I am, I think the British are used to that kind of stuff because the British had suffered quite a bit, the general public in World War II, even with the bombings, with the rationing, and even after the war, there was a lot of rationing. So yeah, that's why the prepping. Uh, I would say if you live in the States, it could be good to have, extra food, spam or whatever that is not perishable. And as John X Army says, for at least 6 months, because things would get back to normal eventually. Listen and learn English. I have a question. Who is buying all of the US debt that Russia and China are selling? Can you explain that? Probably a lot of the big Wall Street banks, uh, and other central banks, hedge funds. Uh, yeah, and but you've noticed though that since China hasn't really sold that much, but Russia has sold a lot, and that's why the price has come down. Because when they start selling, the people that are buying, they will pull their bids lower, and that's why the rates have been going up. So yeah, and the regulatory environment for the big U.S. banks is that when they buy treasuries, it's not considered a risk asset. So it's a good way for them to put their money in those, and they still get some kind of, they're able to borrow almost for nothing, and they get a bit of a return with the treasuries. So yeah, the regulatory environment has been encouraging the banks also to buy it. So I think that's who's buying it. And also, investors in Europe, if you're only getting like less than 1% for German bonds, government bonds, if you're only getting 1.5% for UK gilts, but if you're getting almost 3.25% for US treasuries, you're gonna see some of the foreigners buying as well. And that's why probably the dollar is still fairly strong. Yeah, Saudi Arabia as well has been buying. That's the other thing, a high oil price helps because a lot of these countries that earn their oil in dollars, they're going to be buying bonds as well. Wow, debt that can be written off. No, the debt is not written off. The debt is the U.S. national debt that Americans are still holding on. The public is responsible to service that debt through their taxes. But the scam is, listen and learn English, is that the banks, they can buy that, create money out of thin air to buy those bonds, and then they just, let's say they buy some 10 years at 101 and a half today, and then tomorrow, it goes up to 102. They'll just sell it. They'll just keep playing around in the markets. And I think a lot of these bonds, of course, there's a derivatives market. So there's a lot of price manipulation through derivatives as well, which lets you leverage even more. Well, the other thing, Kevin, that they could do, the Federal Reserve, who holds a lot of U.S. debt, they could just write it off. They could just like write it off. So, one or two more questions, and then I'm going to call it a day for now. I'd like to thank all the participants, all the the questions, all the super chat donations, and this live stream will be recorded and put into my YouTube channel as well. So there's if you'd like to go into the Maneco64 store to buy some merchandise, or to join my Patreon account, or donate to the channel, you can go to the description. Thanks again, everyone. I hope everyone has a great rest of the weekend, and a great week next week. We'll have to see, what happens. I think that one of the important things to look at tomorrow morning, which I will look at, is the Italian bond market. Italy was downgraded almost to junk by Moody's late on Friday. So it will be interesting to see what happens to the markets on Monday. Take care, everyone. Thank you again, and goodbye.